There should be two handouts. If you need a handout, raise your hand. We got a few extras still. So welcome and thank you for coming to the first quarter church council meeting for 2020. So as Tom explained, it's a little bit different than normal, but we will be having lunch down in the street afterwards for those that want to stay, or if you want to just grab a sandwich and go, you can do that. But we again thank Roy and Nikki for all the work they've done in preparing the meal. So please enjoy it, the work they've done. Once again, thanks to our AV guys, John and Ethan up there, for presenting the slides. Keith is working on the sign-up sheet, checking off. Then I guess you want people to sign as they leave. Okay. So yeah, please sign the attendance sheet as you leave. That'll go into the meeting minutes for the church council meeting. I think that's it. Then, so on the handout there, we have the agenda, and as Pastor Tom mentioned, he will also talk a little bit about how we continue to worship, how we continue to serve the community and serve each other. That's not in the agenda, but we will focus some time on that. But our main priorities today is, as advertised, we want to discuss the 2020 budget. And for that, we'll ask our finance chairman, Phil Arnold, to come forward and explain the proposed budget.
Good morning. So if we can go to the next page. There we go. All right, before we get to the budget, a couple other items. I know almost every one of these meetings I get questioned about the mortgage that we have on the church. As of Friday, we have renegotiated that mortgage. The balance as of the end of February was about $560,000. There wasn't a lot of room. We stayed with the room in terms of being able to bring the rate down, given current rates. We did get a small reduction, 467 from 479 to 467. The payoff date remains the same as May 2030. At the end of the day, we reduced the monthly payment about $284, which comes out to about $30,000, a little over $30,000 for the 10-year life of the loan. One of the things I wanted to talk about in terms of the budget is the restricted funds. In prior years, or how the budget is constructed and in dealing with restricted funds. In prior years, the budget itself has been supplemented with the use of restricted funds. For example, there's a library fund. There's a lot of different funds, but there's a library fund. There's a music fund. There's a fund that goes for kids ministries, children's ministries, and so on. And we've used those monies appropriately, I understand, for supplementing the budget, but we've never included those as expenses in the budget. So in revising these things, one of my mandates, if you will, is that all the money that we expend on something, whether it's music or the building or kids programs, all of that gets included as expenses so that we know year to year how much we're actually spending on that. The other item that the CPA, when I was talking with them to make sure I was doing this correctly, came up with or mentioned to me is you are supposed to use restricted funds before you use the general funds on items. So if you had $4,000 you were supposed to expend for some particular item, you had a appropriate restricted fund that had $3,000 in it, you'd use that $3,000 first before you use the general funds. Then the other point of that is always that they could only be used for appropriate funds. You wouldn't use the music fund for the library fund or something like that. Going to, I got ahead of myself one. There we are. First thing we'll do, if I can ever find the right page, is review 2019. The left-hand column, there we are. The left-hand column is the actual, the right hand is the budget. When the budget was made up for 2019, you had projected a deficit during that budget of $26,104. That included personnel additions that you were going to have during 2019. Those did occur. The actual, your total income from the year was a little less than expected, and you had those additional expenses in there. Expenses were just a couple $1,000s ahead of what was supposed to be. But at the end of the year then, after debt is considered, your monthly mortgage payment, instead of having a $26,000 deficit, you ended up with a $44,000 deficit. Those monies were principally covered by unrestricted and unrestricted reserves that you had at the time. Going on to the 2020 budget, and here we're comparing it to the 2019 actual. We have about $59,000 in additional pledges that came in during the year, or not came in during the year, but were pledged for 2020. And then at the end, between operating and building non-pledged that's expected, you end up with a total income about $50,000 higher than what you had during the prior year. Looking at on the expense side of it, here again, in the past years, you've had an operating budget and you've had a building budget that were separate. Here we've combined everything. So you're looking, so the 2019 actual has been redone in that form. So we have expenses for the year 2020 total about $572,000, $31,000 ahead of what you had in the 2019 actual. And on the right-hand side in the comment section, you can see the phone system that needs to be replaced. You're trying to rebuild this children and youth program, and then you have additional personnel that comes into play. So in summary, on the 2020 budget, then you have revenue of $616 versus $569. Your total expenses are up a little bit as well. You have the debt service. It gives you an operating income, in 2020 of almost $44,000. That is before the debt service, principal and interest, which is lower than it's been in the past. So here again, net cash flow for the year is expected to be a $25,000 deficit. We expect to supplement that or cover that, which I'll discuss here in a moment, with restricted funds and unrestricted funds that are savings. One of the things we work on, or I've tried to work on from my past life, if you will, what I measure on, what I watch is cash at the end of the month. So this chart shows you the blue line is when we put together the budget. I put it together on a monthly basis to show what cash at the end of each month is. So you can see the blue line there comes down. You have enough funds here at the beginning of the month, beginning of the year to get you through September. The deficits start to occur deficit in savings start to occur in September, October. We are, however, currently running ahead of that by about $10,000, which is a good thing. So that extends that deficit. It comes then, instead of September, here being the zero line, extends it. It comes back out another month. That is something we'll continue to watch through the year, especially looking at it at mid-year. The proposed, again, going through that again, the proposed budget gives a surplus of $44,000. We have about $70,000 in our debt payment, which leaves us a deficit of $25,000. Attendance and giving are trending upward as suggested by the CPA and has been done in past years. Appropriate restricted funds shall be used to fund operating expenses and also offset some of those shortfalls. Again, in my former life, what we'd also always do is probably mid-year, June or July, look and see how your revenue is coming in, look and see how your expenses are coming in, and make adjustments at that time. And I think the other item that you have in that was handed out is, again, this is how we look at the cash flow on a monthly basis, or operating expenses on the monthly basis. On the left-hand side is the comparison of the actual month. There's two blocks there. On the right-hand side is the comparison of year-to-date. So what I watch is year-to-date cash flow, where we're at the end of that month. So there again, that shows you that you're about $10,000, 9,000 something ahead of where we had projected. Of course, that doesn't take it into consideration where we're at now with services and so on. Any questions? I know I went through that quickly. The amount of restricted funds that are available? At the bottom of, I think it was, yeah, at the bottom of page 6, where we talked about the finance for 2019, at the end of the year, we had approximately $220,000 in cash in total. Donor restricted funds, it's about $66,000. That includes some things that we can spend and some things we can't spend. For example, we have a number of things that I refer to as pass-throughs, like UMCOR that's coming up next Sunday. So the congregation gives money to UMCOR. That money stays in a special account, Roy's mission account, what we call it internally. And then those funds go out. They're never counted in our income. They're never counted in our expenses. They're just pass-throughs because we're giving it to someone else. So that leaves us with about $118,000 in what I would call unencumbered funds. However, keeping in mind your monthly expenses are probably $45,000 to $50,000 a month. So in that, you've got maybe 2 months savings. If you count everything together, we're trying to stay above, as we've passed before in this meeting, stay above that 4 months level. Anything else? I know that was quick and a lot of numbers. If you ever have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me.
If no other questions, we have a motion to accept the 2020 proposed budget. Okay, Bob moves to accept it. Is there a second? And Norm? All right. So all those members of the church council, you should have a voting card. So all those in favor of accepting the budget, raise your card. Looks like 16 maybe. And then opposed? None opposed. All right, thank you. So we'll move forward then with trustees. Steve Dale will talk about some of the potential projects and what's going on with trustees.
Thanks, Doug. The trustees over the past couple, 3 months have looked at various projects that the church may need over a period of time. And the list that you see here are those. And we've kind of looked at that as being something that would maybe occur over the next 3 years. The first one we've talked about before, the controllers and for the sanctuary and the connection. That's controllers for the heating system, for those that maybe have not heard about that before. Currently, the system is fairly old, and if those controllers fail, it could result in the heating and cooling of the church to fail, of this part of the church, the sanctuary and the connection. We were looking at that as at least a 2-year project. We would not do it all at one time. The second item that's just come up just recently is the academy classrooms. We replaced one unit this past summer, and all the others and most of the classrooms there are not in good shape. They are old and could fail at any time. Particularly, we have more flexibility on the heating system. It's the air conditioning system is what we're looking at. But the amount listed there, that $44,000, would allow us to have both heating and air conditioning on a newer, more efficient system. We'd still have our old steam system as a backup, as well from the heating perspective. So that $44,000 would completely cover taking out the old units that are on the roof and replacing it with new equipment. And I think that is in about five classrooms. I think it's the total number that would be involved. The third item is the flat roof repairs, and here again, this is just something, a routine maintenance type thing. We occasionally continue to have a leak here and there, and there's some of the roof, particularly on this wing of the church and back in front of the connection and right next to the sanctuary, the connection area, the flat roof that kind of parallels that part of the old sanctuary is also older roof that has not been replaced for a long time. If you ever went up there, you can see white roof and you can see black roof. The black roof is the old stuff, and that's where we occasionally have a problem. So that is a estimate, a very broad estimate as to what that project might cost. We have not officially had it estimated, but from our calculations and previous costs on roof repair, that's what we think it might be. Yes?
And I know this has been brought up in past years, but should we at one time again begin to ask the question about putting a gable roof over these flat spots so that we can once and for all get rid of the expenditures?
Yeah.
Come back and year after year after year about these.
That would probably be something from an engineering evaluation standpoint, probably ought to be looked at. The issue is all the heating and units and the type thing we have on the roof and how that all would fit in. Obviously, maybe the engineers can explain that and figure out how that could all work. But that's the one issue. A lot of our heating for that wing, and heating and cooling too, in reality, are mounted on the roof. Even the unit, one of the units for the connection, big one is mounted up there. So, but it's probably, you're right, David, that's probably something that we should evaluate to see, because we know flat roofs are going to continue to be a problem going forward. So.
There may be heating and cooling needs or lessons in expenditure simply by putting that roof up.
Yeah. So, but that's good point. We'll take a look and see what we might be able to figure out from that. So, thanks, David. The next item is something that's been brought as a wish list type item, I guess, more than anything, but a lot of people have an interest in looking at that, and that's the electronic sign that would be out on Getz Road to help let the public know what's going on here on a regular basis. And that project, I think that's a fairly firm bid or estimate as to what that would be, of $36,000. Painting the sanctuary is something has been talked about for the last couple, maybe longer than that, at least the last couple of years, if not more. And that is an estimate that was received when they initially started looking at it. So whether that is an accurate number or not, I'm not sure, but it's probably close. And that's $17,000. And the last item is just, parsonage and maintenance type things that could be and may need to be done. And the exterior painting for sure is something that probably ought to be done just from a practical standpoint. I know when I first started on trustees, the parsonage was sort of a cream yellow color. Now it's white. and that's just because the paint's totally bleached out on, or most of it's white anyway. There's parts of it still have a little bit of a cream color, but that's just an estimate of what that might cost, maybe plus maybe some other minor items of routine maintenance and repair. So that's, as you see, that's a pretty big number, but we have a big facility here, and to maintain it, it's going to take regular expenditures as the older the building gets. So and all of these projects, you know, are going to be based on when we get the money and how we get the money and so on. But we're looking at doing it over at least a 3-year period of time. It's not just a 1-year shot that we were thinking about doing these things. And, you know, we had discussion in the last executive council meeting about going ahead and approving the UMW had a certain amount of money for the lounge improvement project. They did not have enough to finish up what they totally wanted to do, but the executive council used from some of the unrestricted funds, decided that we're going to give them the money, extra money they need to complete that total project, which includes painting, flooring, and so on. I think those are the main things, aren't they, Marty, that should take care of it then? And maybe some chairs in there too? Okay, so anyway, that has been approved, so go for it. Anyway, are there any other questions? Or any questions? No? Thank you.
Move on to staff parish, Norm.
Right now, staff parish, they sort of we revisited and looked at the job descriptions, and we're going over the current job description. We are reviewing them with each of the employees, and then following this review period, we're going to do a staff evaluation. And as you said, there's money in the budget for raises. Some of our people haven't had raises in several years, and so that's what we're doing on that path with our employees. And then the second item I just bring up that Pastor Tom, along with the church, is applying for a Lilly grant, which is for a 12-week sabbatical, which would happen in the summer if it's granted. So there's two things. You got to have an application. You got to have an acceptance. There may not be an acceptance, but hopefully there will be. But it's for a 12-week sabbatical, which would happen during the summer months of 2021 if the grant is accepted. So, you know, Tom, if you want to come up and explain a little bit more about the Lilly grant and sabbatical. First of all, do you have any questions for me first about staff parish employees or anything? Okay, no questions. Go ahead.
Oh, there we go. It was muted. All right. So I guess first off, are there any specific questions? I know there's not been a whole lot of time that you've had the information about this Lilly renewal in front of you. Are there specific questions that you have that you would like me to address? Yeah. So, all right. Esther asked what my plans are for that time. So it's plans for our family, and Melissa and I have kind of put it together. Much like our theme that we have for Lent right now, the kind of a general theme that I have is wilderness. And I see in Jesus' ministry that it often tells us that he withdrew to those quiet or out-of-the-way places to pray and reflect and reconnect with God. For me, part of the reason is, a couple people have said, well, you haven't been here that long, and no, I haven't, but I'll have been here almost 2 years by the time I would be taking this if it's granted. But I've also been in ministry for 20 years, and particularly prior to coming here, my last 2 appointments have been challenging. The first appointment prior to that was challenging because it was an enormous old building in a church that was in decline and really wrestling with, are we going to survive or not? And so seeing where we're at budget-wise, and particularly that things are trending up, is kind of a breath of fresh air for me. My appointment then immediately prior to this, there were some pretty contentious things going on when I went into there, and a lot of my first 4 years there, as one of my lay people there put it, I was kind of the triage doctor stabilizing the patient. That we were successful in that, but it really was part of what led to my being appointed here, was that I'd had a conversation with my superintendent and said, all right, they need a new pastor. They either need someone else to come in and pick up now that we've come through this healing, or I need to completely remake how I'm leading, because much of what I did helping to calm things down and help bring some healing was necessary, but that wasn't a long-term strategic plan for leadership for them. And as it was, they sent me here. So based on those 8 years of ministry prior to here, they did take a little bit of a toll. As Melissa reminded people, prior to starting my last appointment, I wasn't on any blood pressure medication, and 6 months in, I was on 2. Now, I'm down to 1 now, and if I got a little more serious about exercising and losing a little weight, I'd probably be able to get rid of that one as well. So we're at a better place, but at the same time, I'm looking at 20 years of ministry behind me and at least that much ahead, and wanting to say, okay, catch my breath, what's it going to take to be able to function and thrive and do well in ministry and flourish as a pastor, because Lilly gives these grants with the recognition that healthy, flourishing pastors are better able to lead churches, and congregations are better for it. So that's why the grant is made to the church. Aldersgate is actually the one who applies for the grant to benefit the pastor, but also to benefit the congregation. And so I'm grateful to Terry for helping to help pull some of the things together for what the congregation will do, because the congregation will have some opportunities and things to do during that time as well, in addition to continuing weekly worship and all of the things that we normally do. Nothing will be disrupted as far as the continuance of that, but actually there will be some other opportunities added to that. So to answer Esther's question, though, in the broad sweep of it, for me, it's going to be an opportunity to kind of step back and do some praying and reflecting. Part of it for me is I really want to be able to have some time to be reminded and have this call to ministry that God's placed on my life renewed and refreshed and reinvigorated. And so doing some things that answer that question of what would make my heart sing. So having some downtime, having some time with family, and having some solitude. So we're fortunate that we have our lake cottage, so part of the time between some of the activities we'll be spending there just to take it easy. At the beginning of it, my dream would be to go and spend some time hiking a little bit of the Appalachian Trail. And so what I'm proposing what I'm writing up will be that my first week of the leave will be to go down to North Carolina and hike the section of the Appalachian Trail that goes through the Smoky Mountain National Park. That'll be a way to really step back from things and have some silence and solitude to just unwind. Be home for about a week or so, and then we'll take about 2.5 to 3 weeks that we're going to go to Florida. Part of that time we'll be finding an Airbnb on the beach and just relaxing. Part of that time will be to honor our kids, because they never chose to be PKs, and they didn't choose to have a life that requires them to be uprooted and moved every 3 to 4 years. They didn't sign on to have a dad whose job often overlaps with Christmas breaks and spring breaks when all their friends get to go and do stuff. So we're going to go to Orlando and be able to do Disney with them for 3 or 4 days, just to be able to have that. One of the things that one of the girls, when we were asking them, what are some things you'd love to do? Mallory said, I want to swim with dolphins. So we're in the process trying to figure out how to make that happen. So it will be a time for us as a family to just have some fun. After we come back from that, we'll be home for a couple of weeks to be able again to just take a break and enjoy the lake and that life. And then toward the end of July, we're looking at about 2 weeks that we would fly out to Seattle and take about 2 weeks to drive from Seattle down to San Francisco along the Pacific Coast Highway. And so seeing some of Seattle, seeing some of San Francisco, but also we're looking at maybe like a whale watching excursion up in the Pacific Northwest, getting to see redwoods, and because nobody in our family's ever been in that part of the country. So again, a lot of encounters with nature. After we come home from that, that'll be about week 10. I'm going to do another week of hiking. Originally, I thought I'd like to go out to Yosemite or something like that, but logistics of flying and traveling with backpacking equipment isn't real easy. So what I'm writing into my proposal would be a week of hiking on the Ozark Trail through the Mark Twain National Forest in Missouri. So again, to begin with some of that solitude, end with some of that solitude. Weeks 11 and 12 will actually be home because summer break for kids is not a full 12 weeks. And Melissa working at school will have to be getting ready to go back to work. So part of that last 2 weeks for me will be to have to be available to get the kids out the door and off to school. But for me, I'm going to use that last 2 weeks to begin kind of writing what's called a rule of life. In monastic communities, the rule of Benedict, St. Benedict formed a monastic community, and we still today have Benedictine monks, and they have this rule of life that kind of governs what their daily practices are of spiritual life and things like that. And there are guides to kind of help think about what is your own rule of life. And so prior to stepping back into my role as pastor, I want to be intentional about kind of, all right, what have I learned over the last 10 weeks about slowing down, stepping back, being intentional about drawing near to God? How do I write that into something that will help to sustain me for the next 20 years of ministry? And even though we'll be back at home and the girls will be at school, I'm going to use it as an opportunity to practice this spiritual discipline of stepping away. So it'll give me an opportunity while they're at school to say, all right, so let's see, we've got Fox Island right out here, or I could head down to one of the Acres nature preserves to go and walk around or take a book and sit and read. But I want to use it as a time to practice those short-term intervals of stepping away, because you don't take a 12-week leave every year. But it is possible to say, you know what, I really need to take this afternoon and just kind of pull back for a little bit to go and pray. So it's going to be an opportunity to kind of explore and see what are the places that I could have in mind that when those times come up that I can say, you know what, I'm going to head out there to Fox Island for a little while to just walk and pray and be with God. So that's in a nutshell the things that Melissa and I have been working on and putting together and writing into that proposal that we have. And I know Terry's been working on we had some of the feedback from a small group and a few of the response forms that came in about what things are going to look like on the congregation side as well. So having said all that, are there any other questions? All right. Well, very good. Any other questions in general about Aldersgate, about where we're at or what's going on? Well, I will just offer my 2 cents as far as my state of the church, that I think we're doing really well right now. I know that we've still got some work to do as far as continuing to support Pastor Ashley and working to get our children and youth programming rebuilt. It's not something that we ever expected to happen quickly, but I feel like we've seen some good progress in there. The current situation is definitely going to be a little bit of a setback just for the short term, at least another month as far as the schools. It may extend beyond that, it may not. I feel really blessed to be here. I'm grateful to actually be here. I mean, Melissa and I keep saying this has been the smoothest transition into a new appointment that we've experienced in 20 years of ministry. And you have all been very gracious and so welcoming and accepting and affirming of our family and my ministry with you. And I hope that we can continue to build on that and continue to see good things happening. In that vein, and I'd mentioned at the beginning of the service, it is unsettling right now because of the uncertainty with what's going on with this coronavirus. I don't know what next week will bring. I'm grateful that we were here today. I really am, because it really has kind of helped put me at ease to know that we can still come together and still be the body of Christ. We don't have to, that we don't cease to be the body of Christ if we can't, but it still feels good to be here today. I don't know if we'll be able to next week or the week after. A lot of that's just going to depend upon what officials tell us we should do or what we must do. Yeah, Julie. I think, at least at this time, so our bishop has been sending things out, and one of the things he'd said was that just because this is going on right now doesn't mean that our mission as the church stops. And I appreciate that word from him. He basically said, use the best practices you're being told, and do what's best for your community of faith, and follow whatever advice and recommendations. I've heard that in some other annual conferences, bishops have been a little more authoritative and said, you all must cancel your churches. Our bishop has not done that. Now, right now, Allen County is not necessarily a hot spot as far as the number of cases, and I'm sure there are some, but as far as the last reports, there still weren't any confirmed. Now again, I'm sure there are some, we just haven't heard that. Allen County is following basically what the governor has said about gatherings of over 250 people. I have a friend that had been my associate, and the church that I had served in Marion. In Grant County, their Board of Health is being a little more aggressive, and they actually were being much more strict than the state did, and they said no gatherings of over 50 people, which impacted more churches. And so there were, most of the churches there, if they had anticipated over 50, said, sorry, we can't meet. So I don't know if we'll have something like that come along or not. But as far as what it looks like, so some of the groups that meet here, my feeling is we kind of leave it to them because they're responsible for their groups. From the leadership down, the Boy Scout troop have said that all of their activities are going to be suspended until April 13th or whenever they would be starting back up after schools resume. The ballet that use our facilities, they have made the decision to discontinue. The group that meet here for the karate lessons, the gentleman that leads that, I think they have around 20, 25 students. As long as we're agreeable to it, he would like to continue to meet if possible. The Aldersgate Academy, the board, I feel like, is doing a stellar job as far as communicating with one another and about what to do, because a lot of our Board of Health in Allen County, their conversations weren't just around do we cancel or not, but who's impacted and how much. And for the academy, right now their policy is that they're a small enough group with about 40 students that they are going to continue to operate, because a lot of those parents depend upon that for them to continue doing their jobs. One of the things that would necessitate an immediate closure of the academy would be a confirmed case of one of the students. Lori had said that one of her bigger concerns is that as long as their staff don't drop, meaning that if their staff become ill and aren't here, they may not have adequate staffing to keep the academy running. So they've got things in place. They're doing the best job they can. They actually are doing a really good job because they had RSV go through the academy 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they are on top of making sure that everything is clean and running toys through the dishwashers and wiping everything down and having the kids wash their hands and do all of those things. So as far as within their classrooms, they are doing an excellent job of keeping on top of that. Yeah, David.
I'd like to think that just our church proper would be on a regular basis during the daytime, cleansing the hand contact surfaces, the door handles. This
Right.
is something that offices are doing. I'd like to think that here at our church we would do.
And I'm going to check with our custodian since it's contracted. And I mean, the custodial service is offered to come in and do deep or thorough cleanings, whatever that it would be. But yeah, Keith.
We got a communication from Reliable Cleaning earlier this week that said that they have stepped up their disinfectants in the church, and that they do intend to spray all of the frequently touched surfaces with a disinfectant.
Okay.
If they want us to go, we would like them to go further than that, we can modify our contract and
Okay. All right. Thank you. So, as a church, we certainly are going to be praying for one another, for the community around us, for people that are being most impacted by this virus. While there's a lot of good information and better information that continues to come out, we've got alarmists screaming that it's the end of the world, and we've got people that are being rather cavalier about, you know what, I'm young, I'll be fine, so I'm going to do whatever I want, but that really disregards them potentially spreading it to someone else that is at risk. And so the truth and the reality probably, it certainly lies somewhere between, but it's still a moving target, and we're not quite sure what the total impact is going to be. We can't change the course that the virus is going to take apart from our own participation in taking these steps toward these best practices. But the role that I think we as the church have is that we can have something to say about the fear, anxiety, and isolation that people are going to experience. And so, in a practical sense, we are going to continue Me and You. Kelly had mentioned, and I know Terry's been thinking about it and talking about it, there are people that depend upon that meal. And so maybe having them come in and sit down together to eat isn't a good idea, but there's no reason that we can't continue to prepare those meals and have them form a drive-up line and give them those meals to take with them. And that's the plan for this coming Thursday, and hopefully we can continue to do that without any disruption. We're grateful for all the support that you give. Terry, are there other supplies or things that you know of that we're going to need to be able to do this? Okay, so purchasing more carry-out containers. Do you need donations of like plastic grocery bags to be able to put them in, or don't know? All right, so this week will be the test run, but that's our plan. I mean, we want to be able to continue to offer that. Beyond that, are there other thoughts that you may have about ways that we can support others? I mentioned it with even just phone calls and note cards. One of the things that has crossed my mind, for the average age of our congregation, we do have people that have contacted me and said, I feel like I or my spouse and I are a part of this vulnerable group, so we're going to not be coming for the next few weeks. For some of those people who may be shut in or homebound or just really should not be getting out and about, if there are some of you who feel like, don't feel like I'm at risk, and so if someone needed someone to run and pick up a prescription or pick up some groceries, I'd be willing to do that. I think that's one of the ways that maybe we as a congregation can support those who feel like they may be at risk of finding a way to coordinate picking up groceries or prescriptions or other things like that. Are there other things like that that you think that, hey, here's a way that we could make a difference? Yeah, Stephen.
You mentioned during prayer time, kids out of school not receiving sustenance. Do we have any capacity to step into that gap?
I don't know. One of the things that we might be able to do, or that we could do, so Ashley's said she might be here. I don't see her. Ashley Moreland, that does our communications. One of the things that she said that St. Joseph United Methodist is doing was trying to get some sack lunches put together. My understanding is that Fort Wayne Community is going to be making lunches available, but they weren't quite sure when those were going to actually be available. So they were hoping to maybe step in, and if it's going to be not until Tuesday or Wednesday this week, they were hoping to prepare sack lunches that could be picked up at their church. She'd asked if I thought we might be interested, and I tried to reach out to the principal at Lindley since we've worked with them in the past, and I just got an email back from her this morning, and she said, thank you, but I know it's late that I'm getting back to you now, so I'm not sure that it would be helpful, and since I didn't want to do something without talking to her, knowing that there was an avenue for it. That said, she does have access to being able to share information with her student body. And so if we do get things coordinated with our Thursday evening meals, if the schools are providing breakfast and lunch, we could also maybe let her know that if you have families that do need an evening meal, Thursday nights, they can come past here. So I think that utilizing what we already do is probably our best course as far as doing that. I know in the emails we've got, because of our kids going there, Southwest is providing meal pickups available for any students in Southwest schools, and they're serving all of them out of the high school, and families can come by. I think it was from like 11 to noon or 4 to 6. To pick up meals. They just have to say how many students they have, and that's how many meals they'll give them. So. Are any of you in a position where you would be willing to help with maybe delivering things to someone if we were able to do that? All right. Part of that may be, and I know that we've got our volunteers in the office. We're going to be talking about it this week and figuring out what we need to do to get things put in place. Part of it may be that having volunteers that man the desk to take phone calls as people call and say, yes, here's something that I need. And we'll probably have to coordinate those through the church office to be able to make that happen. But we'll send emails and things. But I'm not writing names down, but knowing that there's some interest and willingness to step up and help with that, it gives us a place to start. So, all right. Any other questions for today? Yeah, Terry. Okay. So Terry thinks that maybe we need a motion to move forward with the application for the Lilly Renewal Grant. So is that a motion, Terry? Okay.
File the application for the Lilly Grant. Okay. And a second by Bob. Yep. Okay. All those in favor of submitting the application? 16 and opposed. Okay, motion passes.
All right. Well, thank you for your willingness to be a part of this journey that we're on right in the short term, but also for the looking down the road with the Lilly renewal. Seeing no other questions, Roy has and Nikki have got things together for lunch. If you want to come down to the street and have lunch here, you're welcome to do so, but I know there are also things ready if you would prefer to pick it up and take it with you. But if you would, let's close our time in prayer. God, we're grateful for the way that you continue to work in this world, that you don't take time off, that you are always there, always tending to your people, always listening to our prayers, and always responding. We don't always see, God, how you're moving and working or the answers that you provide, but we're confident that you are. So we pray that your blessings would be upon your people. We pray that you would let common sense and wisdom prevail, that you would guide decisions that we make as individuals and as a congregation with compassion, that we would look for those ways that exercise prudence, but also compassion to share your love. We pray your blessings upon this day as we go forth. We pray that as we share this meal together, that your blessings will be upon the food to nourish and strengthen us. May you bring us through this, God, and may we be able to look back at the end of it all and say, you were there guiding us each step of the way. In Jesus' name.